The rain came down over the city like static on a dead radio channel. May 25, 2026. Midnight had already punched the clock, but the precinct lights stayed on. Out beyond the glass, routers blinked in apartment windows, extenders hummed in hallways, and little plastic boxes kept secrets they were never built to hold. Tonight's files were thin in some places and ugly in others. 4 cases, 2 murders, 2 break-ins. All of them carried the same weapon, command injection. The kind of crime where a bad input stops being data and starts giving orders. The kind where a cheap device at the edge of the network becomes a stool pigeon for the whole joint. First on the slab was CVE-2026-7538, a critical murder with a CVSS score of 9.8 and an EPSS probability of 1.8. 8000 RU router, firmware version 7.1 Q20202521. The scene was cgbin stecky.cg.cg inside the CGI handler, where the proto-argument was supposed to be handled like plain input. Instead, it could be slipped into an operating system command. That puts this under CVE-78, improper neutralization of special elements used in an OS command. The attacker sends a crafted remote HTTP request to kosteki.cg.cg, places shell metacharacters or command syntax inside proto. The CGI handler passes that value into a shell command without proper validation, and the router executes the attacker's command with the privilege of the web service, often root on this class of device. The affected range, based on the report in front of me, is Totolink A8000 RU firmware 7x1 CQ222200521. No broader range has been confirmed, but crews should treat nearby A8000 RU firmware builds as suspicious until proven clean. Totolink gear shows up in small offices, home networks, regional ISP deployments, and low-cost edge environments where nobody checks the locks after installation. Use the router as a quiet doorway for ransomware reconnaissance. Remediation is a hard case because no exact patched version has been published in the intelligence provided for CVE-2026-7538 as of today. If Totolink releases a build newer than 7.1 CQ2020-5221 that names this CVE, upgrade immediately to that vendor-patched version or later. Until then, sysadmins and network teams should remove remote WAN access to the management interface, block public access to hgbin-nc-steg.cg, restrict administration to a trusted management VLAN, and place a firewall rule in front of the device. Security teams should hunt for HTTP requests to hgbin-nc-steg.cg containing proto-values with semicolons, backticks, $, command substitution, pipes, curl, wg, busybox, or chmod. In router logs, look for unexpected outbound connections, change DNS settings, new startup scripts, or traffic to command and control hosts. But that wasn't the only body on the slab tonight. Next came CVE-2026-41922, another critical murder, CVSS 920TA TSS probability 1 pers, CWE-7ATA 2001A Wi-Fi extender, hardware version 2.1, firmware LFMZX282020SU2000.2022 Phi1.2000. The weapon was OS command injection in the wireless.cg binary. 2 inputs were named, CWE-78. The attacker sends an unauthenticated HTTP post request to wireless.cg, plants command syntax inside Z11G channel or pin. The binary takes that input and uses it in a command line operation, likely to configure wireless channel or WPS pin behavior, and the shell treats the attacker's payload as an instruction instead of a value. The extender obeys the wrong voice. The confirmed affected version is WDR201A Wi-Fi extender hardware, V2221 running firmware, LFMZX28ZU40922 V1.W2. Wi-Fi extenders are everywhere people. Small shops, back offices, warehouses. They are often installed once and forgotten until they fail, which makes them fine hideouts for repeat traffic and quiet persistence. This case is especially grim because the report says unauthenticated remote attackers can execute arbitrary shell commands, no login, no user click, just reachability. If the management surface is exposed to the internet or reachable from a guest wireless zone, an attacker can turn a signal booster into a beachhead. They can alter wireless settings, join a botnet, stage malware, intercept local traffic, or scan the internal network for softer targets. For remediation, no exact patched firmware version has been published in the report for CVE 2026-41922 as of May 25, 2026. Device owners should check the vendor channel for a firmware newer than LFM ZX28 through Z04 RIO922 v1 that explicitly addresses CVE-U04 WIO922 v1.226.22.41922, then upgrade to that version or later. Until a patch lands, network teams should disable remote administration, isolate the extender on a dedicated VLAN, block access to wireless.cgi from untrusted networks, and turn off WPS if the device allows it. If the extender cannot be isolated, replace it. Security teams should search web access logs, if available, for post requests to wireless.cg where CLONG channel or pin contains shell characters, URL encoded command syntax, or commands like telnet w, ncwg, www, wwtftp, or curl. Watch for sudden outbound traffic from the extender, new DNS patterns, or unexplained wireless configuration changes. I barely had time to light another cigarette when the next file landed on my desk. CVE 2026-705 was a medium break-in, CVSS 623 EPSS probability 1%. The box on the table was JD Cloud JDCOS version 4.520.4.5.1820. The vulnerable function was set-tipped-vinfo in the HDCAP service interface, and the guilty argument was vid. Again, the category is CVE-78 command injection. The attacker sends a remote request to JDCAP that reaches set-tipped-vinfo, manipulates the vid parameter with shell meta characters or command fragments, and the service uses that value inside an operating system command meant to configure IPTV behavior. The command interpreter then runs the injected payload. What should have been a channel or VLAN identifier becomes a crowbar. The confirmed affected version is JD Cloud JDCOS 4.5.1 R450.118. JDCOS is associated with JD Cloud consumer and network devices, often router-like gear used in home and small business environments. The CVSS score is lower than the murders on tonight's board, likely due to conditions around privilege, exposure, or authentication that are not fully spelled out in the brief. But do not let medium make you sleepy. Remote command injection on an edge device is still a loaded gun. If reachable, an attacker may gain command execution, tamper with network settings, redirect traffic, load malware, or use the device for lateral movement. The report says the exploit has been made public, which means the street knows the trick even if the KEV board has not pinned this offender as caught in the act. There is no exact patched version listed for CVE 2026-7705 in the supplied intelligence as of today. Administrators should look for a JDCOS release newer than 4.5.1 R4518 that names CVE 2026-7705 and upgrade to that version or later. Until then, DevOps and network operations teams should block untrusted access to JDCCAP, disable any cloud or remote management feature that exposes the service interface, and limit administration to a trusted subnet. Developers maintaining similar service code should stop building shell commands with raw parameters, use safe APIs, enforce strict numeric validation for vid, and reject anything that is not an expected IPTV identifier. Detection should focus on JDCAP requests containing vid with semicolons, pipes, ampersands, encoded spaces, backticks, or command names. Check for device processes spawning shells, unexpected cron entries, and outbound traffic that starts soon after configuration requests. The night was far from over. Last came CVE 2026-7692, another medium break-in, CVSS 62026-7620 EPSS probability 1%. The address was Wavlink WL-WN 570HA1 model R70HA1 firmware v141n.cg in the ping-didn't function. This is CVE-78 again, and the pattern is almost too familiar. The attacker sends a remote request to adme.cdeen invoking behavior tied to ping DNS. The DDNS parameter should identify a dynamic DNS host or setting. Instead, the attacker inserts command syntax. The web CGI code passes DDNS into a ping or related shell command without proper neutralization. The shell executes the injected command, and the device becomes another compromised light in the rain. The confirmed affected version is Wavlink WL-WN 57DHA1R7DHA1 firmware, V14111. Wavelink extenders and access point devices are common in homes, small offices, hotels, temporary networks, and places where coverage matters more than hardening. The report says remote attack is possible and public exploit material exists. Authentication requirements are not clearly confirmed in the brief, so defenders should assume risk anywhere the admin CGI is reachable from an untrusted network. An attacker who lands command execution can alter DDNS behavior, install a persistent script, open a reverse shell, conduct internal scanning, or turn the device into part of a distributed attack network. In a ransomware story, this kind of edge foothold is the first quiet chapter. No exact patched version is listed in the supplied intelligence for CVE 2026-77692 as of May 25, 2026-77692 as of May 25, 2022-21, then explicitly remediates this CVE, then upgrade to that build or later. If no patch is available, sysadmins should disable WAN administration, block CVE-bin adam.cg from untrusted addresses, restrict management to wired or trusted VLAN access, and consider replacing exposed units. Security teams should look for requests to HEG-bin adam.cgi involving ping.ins and DDNS values that contain shell control characters, URL encoded payloads, or commands such as ping followed by extra operators, WG. Network monitoring should flag unexpected outbound sessions from the extender, especially to unfamiliar IP. Same rain. The lesson is plain enough to read under a flickering street lamp. Edge devices are no longer background furniture. They are computers with radios, shells, web handlers, and too often, sloppy input handling. Command injection happens when software trusts a field that should never be trusted, then hands it to the operating system like a signed confession. Tonight's action list is short and sharp. Inventory totaling A8000RU, WDR201A W8000RU, WA88WAN570HA1 devices. Remove management interfaces from the public internet. Segment them away from business assets. Hunt for suspicious CGI requests and strange outbound traffic. Upgrade when vendor firmware is available. Replace what cannot be patched. This is Jack Cypher signing off. Keep your ports closed, your logs warm, and never trust a parameter standing alone in the rain.